And if someone is at home, could you also just check that you can hear me by waving or shouting hello? And someone tell me, yeah, we're getting that loud and clear. That's good. Great. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our 2022 AGM. Really exciting to see you all here and to not quite see those of you on Zoom. This is a first for us, is to have a hybrid AGM. The pandemic has made us learn lots of new things that we've never done before. And we have, many of us are at home on Zoom, and there are many of us in the building here as well. So it's really nice to have people in the same place, but it's also great that we can have more people participating right across Nova Scotia to by using the Zoom meeting. So my name is David Hodd, and I'm the Director of Operations and Development at Ecology Action Centre. And it's my privilege today to help get the show on the road and help us get through the AGM, get through all the business on time. My aim is for us to finish that in time for 8:30, because then we can have more time having teas and coffees and nibbles and natters at the end. If you need washrooms at all, don't feel you've got to sort of cross your legs. If you need to go and use the washrooms, they're out there. If you're at home and you need to use the washrooms, I assume you know where to go. I don't know that very well. If you're online, there are chat buttons, I hope you're able to find those chat buttons. It should be visible, probably typically at the bottom of the screen, and then you can open up the chat and then you can enter into there. And Rowan is going to be responding to all of the chat that you have. So if you have any questions, and they could be, I can't hear anything, why is it going on? Or they could be some really more pertinent to our work that you want to raise during some of the meetings. That's the space to do that. And Rowan will bring some of that into the room so that where we have panel discussions and so on, we're able to ask those questions directly of board members or whoever's presenting. So during the course of this AGM, we're going to have a number of motions that need to be done as part of the business of the AGM. Remember, you only vote if you're a member. So if you are not a member of EAC, well, welcome to our AGM first of all. Formally, you should not partake in any votes unless you do that. We're not expecting any really contentious votes, so we're not feeling that we need to sort of make sure people shows evidence that they're a member before they vote. That would be unnecessary. So there are two sorts of votes that we'll be having. There's an informal motion, and these are ones where actually there isn't really a strict need to sort of check that there is an agreement. And all we need for those informal motions is, in addition to the person who proposes that motion, for someone to put their name forward to say, I second. And in order for Virginia to be able to get the notes, it's really important that we know your name. So please make sure you say your name as you do that. In fact, that applies for any of the questions. If there's any conversation, questions that we need to have, it'd be great to know what your name is, because not everybody in the room knows everyone's names. I'm new here and I don't know everyone's names. So do that. As well as the informal motions, we will have some formal motions, which, if you're online, will take the form of a poll. And what will happen on the screen is you'll be asked to partake in that poll, and you'll need to select the answer that you want to do. That's how the polls will take place online. If you are in the room, what you'll need to do is raise your hand, okay? And I don't think you need any technical advice on how to do that. What you will need is to keep your hand up, because we're likely to need to count you all up in order to do that. So, okay, I better stop now, because my key task is to get us all through on time, and it's now 6:07. So if I hand over to Christina McDonald, one of our co-chairs, who's going to do the land acknowledgement for us, and we'll get the show on the road.
Thanks, Ian.
Good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see you all. So we are gathered in Mi'kma'ki, the land of the Mi'kmaq. This land is by the 1725 Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which established the rules for ongoing relationships between nations. none of us would be here today at this AGM if we didn't have a deep love for this land. And as we look out the window, and as you're tuning in virtually, perhaps you're outside, or you've got a window to look out, and it's a especially lovely time of year with the golden light and the wind blowing and the cicadas buzzing. The land and the water here are a source of power and grounding and healing for all of us, especially during times of distress and suffering like we have all experienced for years now with the pandemic. As we seek to return to normal, we must remember the norms of our society rest heavily on a system that has sought to destroy Indigenous people and their cultures and thrives on deep inequity. We must all work to decolonize ourselves through our words and actions. The Ecology Action Centre is committed to environmental and social justice. And as members here, as part of a membership, we are here to learn from and support one another and contribute to our collective impact in ways that are meaningful to each one of us. So I'd like to take just a moment to a moment of silence to reflect, please. Okay. So the next item on the agenda for this evening is the acceptance of the agenda and the approval of the minutes of the 2021 AGM. And both those items were circulated in advance, and there are copies available. There's still some left on the table here. I hope you've had a chance to review those two items and refresh your memories. The acceptance of the agenda is an informal undertaking. It does not require a vote. So what I'd like to do is make a motion to accept the agenda and grant our governance guru has actually given me some precise wording here to follow. And that is that the normal business of the annual general meeting is before the membership with this agenda. So I'd like to move to accept the agenda, to make a motion to accept the agenda, and we need a mover. Anne-Marie Dalton. Thank you, Anne-Marie, and a seconder. Rhiannon. Wonderful. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. The next item is the approval of the minutes of the 2021 annual general meeting. And this is a more formal process. It does require a vote by the membership. So the first thing I would like to do is to make a motion to approve the minutes of the 2021 AGM. I need somebody who will move that motion, please. Grant. Thank you. And a seconder, Mike. Virginia, you're busily taking notes there. Thank you. And then we're going to launch our Zoom poll at the same time as I ask all the members in attendance here to vote on this motion. So I think the Zoom poll is running, and if you could all raise your hands if you accept the, or those who wish to accept the minutes, please raise your hand. Those who reject the minutes, and any abstentions. Okay, and the poll is running.
Just went up and then it disappeared.
Okay.
That was universally approved.
Okay, excellent, approved. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving along. The next item on the agenda is the board report. And I will be delivering that report with my wonderful co-chair, John Crace, who is unable to join us in person, but is zooming in virtually from his home after gum surgery. So John is going to deliver the first piece of the report, and then I will follow. John, are you there?
I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Okay, and we're just going to try and spotlight you here. So your face is on screen. There he is. Okay, John, you're coming through loud and clear. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Christina. And I'm sorry I can't be there tonight, but I'll do my best to represent everyone here in Lunenburg County who's an EAC member and beyond. I just want to issue my own welcome to everyone. I think this must be the 51st EAC annual general meeting, and that's a great accomplishment all by itself. Looking back over the past year, it's hard not to extend the timeline just a little bit to give some context to the remarkable changes at the Ecology Action Centre. Action is our middle name, and it applies as much to the board of directors as to the organization as a whole. Just 3 years ago, we changed up the EAC governance model from the triumvirate model led by the 3 senior directors to an executive director model where a single person oversees the entire operation and is ultimately responsible to the board for carrying out the mission, vision, and values of the Ecology Action Centre. No small task, and not for the faint of heart. And there's a big, huge, wonderful team that backs that person up. After one false start, we were able to coax the one and only Maggie Burns back to lead the EAC as its executive director. Never far from the work of the organization, Maggie returned after a brief hiatus after serving as its managing director, and among other things, delivering the building renovation that resulted in the EAC being the most energy efficient building, office building in the whole country. Now, as executive director, she has overseen, among many other things, a solar power plant installed on the roof this past summer. The senior management team has welcomed newcomer David Hod as Director of Operations and Development and our host this evening. And the long-serving Marlon McLeod, Director of Programs, continues to hold it all together with her understated and collaborative leadership. Maggie's appointment as Executive Director in June of 2021, which seems like somehow forever ago, also encouraged Grant McDonald to rejoin the board after his own 3-year hiatus, having served as the co-chair until 2016. Grant brought his wise counsel and deep experience in leading the governance committee to revamp, rewrite, and reimagine the EAC policy documents with the dedicated assistance of several board members. In a bold experiment, the governance committee also restructured the board meetings. Instead of monthly meetings that covered almost everything, the board now meets quarterly to review and discuss specific and significant EAC-related subject matter. For in-person attendees, the much appreciated snack treats remain a common factor. Change includes passing the torch. And after just over 6 years of service, my term has expired and I must step down from the official duties. I'm grateful for the privilege and experience of working with current co-chair Christina McDonald and past co-chair Anne-Marie Dalton and the many board members I have gotten to know and work with over the years. There is some turnover of the board this year, and the new board members will find inspiration and mentorship wherever they turn. I'm also thankful for getting to know and working with so many of the EAC staff and management team. They have been a source of great encouragement and inspiration in our collective pursuit of an equitable and sustainable future. I keep on hearing Will Balzer and Kelsey, and Guru and Ray and Marla and Maggie out there speaking, writing, and putting the EAC forward, and all the people that back them up, the communications team and all those other activities that are so working so hard. And it's one of those tasks that's like rolling the boulder up the hill and then having it roll back down the next day and starting again. But there's no relenting. It keeps going up. So thanks very much, and bring on the next 50 years. Christina, over to you. Thanks.
So yes, my name is Christina McDonald. I'm the co-chair of the Ecology Action Center board, and I had the tremendous pleasure of serving as co-chair with John for the past couple years. And so John reflected on the past year or so, and I've been asked to speak to the coming year and the forward-looking piece. My experience professionally has been working with non-governmental organizations as executive director myself, and as managers and coordinators. And I've had the benefit of working, or I've had the experience of working for organizations with boards who are not as active or as engaged as that of the Ecology Action Center. And I've seen that the detriment, that it's to the detriment of the organization. So it's been an incredible privilege and eye-opener to join the board and be part of this board. I joined in 2019, the before times. And so my particular interest in working on the board has more to do with the organizational culture and the management pieces. And so when I think about the year ahead and reflect on the year ahead, I'm particularly committed as the co-chair to create a space where the new board members flourish. We have a number of new board members joining us, and they'll be approved tonight. So it's especially exciting to have these new individuals joining us with their diverse perspectives and experiences. I'm also very excited. John reflected on the past year has been a year of change for the board, where we've shifted our structure from monthly meetings to a quarterly format focused on key themes. And I'm particularly interested in working with the board and staff and senior leadership team to continue to evaluate that shift and make sure that it allows the board to continue to perform its duties, but also create a generative, creative space for discussion. And one of the exercises that I was involved in the past year that I think speaks to the Ecology Action Center's commitment to thinking outside of the box and systemic change was a undertaking to revisit and create a new mission, vision, and values, and to inform strategic planning. And those were undertaken virtually and as well in person at the Deanery at two wonderful events in between COVID lockdowns. And there was a real buzz and excitement there with the staff and the board in attendance to consider a number of things looking forward. But one of them was this key goal of broadening our tent for environmental and social justice, but also to seek invitations to step into other tents and learn from other conversations and be guided by the wisdom and experience of other organizations and in leadership positions. And I think that's a really wonderful thing for the organization as a whole to collaboratively agree on. And I think as co-chair anticipating this new influx of new board members with their diverse experiences, that really is one of the major ways that a board can contribute to a thriving organization is bringing these diverse perspectives to the conversations, working closely with the senior leadership team and other staff members to welcome other perspectives and to continue this mission to seek systemic change in meaningful ways. So the note I wanted to end on is something I would be remiss in not noting, is that we here are all members of the Ecology Action Center. And as travel restrictions and social distancing requirements loosen, I'm genuinely excited to get to know all of you better, hopefully through more in-person conversations and meetings like this one. And I encourage you all to find your own ways to spread the word about the Ecology Action Center. It is surprising how often I encounter people who have not heard of the Ecology Action Center. And so I think so I encourage you all to find your own ways to engage with the Ecology Action Center's diverse work and speak to others about our work. Please encourage them to become memberships. The financial support of memberships is so important for this organization. It's called non-discretionary funds, and that means it's not tied to the requirements of funders. So it is incredibly important source of funding to support the work of the Ecology Action Center. So please encourage others to join, and please continue to support the organization in all the ways that you do. So on that note, I will conclude my board report and pass things over to Maggie Burns, who is unable to join us in person, but will be tuning in virtually. Maggie, you are now spotlighted, and the stage is yours.
Wonderful.
Director's report.
You can hear me, I presume. I can't see anyone anymore, but I take it there are some nods. So sorry not to be there in person tonight, sparing you some germs. No one wants a germy speech. Thank you, Christina, and thank you, John. Thanks for your work and the board's work and for those reports. We were made for these times. This is the title of an essay by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. It came to my mind as I was thinking about this speech and the times we find ourselves in. This is the moment we've been working for. There have never been so many individuals on so many different fronts who are passionately concerned for our planet. No question, these are scary times, but it's also an amazing moment and one that EAC is built for. EAC inspires. We bring nuance and fierce clarity and deep compassion. We mobilize community action. To quote from the essay a bit more, ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. This is what we do as EAC. So while on the topics of dramatic change and tasks, I want to give you all a task. Next week, I urge you to take to the streets with all your friends and relatives. In 2019, over 10,000 people rallied in Halifax to demand climate action, and decision makers noticed, setting ambitious environmental goals for the province. Now it's past time for a concrete plan to achieve those goals. School Strike for Climate, Fridays for Future, and their allies are organizing a massive climate strike on September 23rd as part of a global effort. And we need your help to make our message loud and clear. No more BS, no more talk and empty promises. It's time for real climate action. So this rally is next Friday, September 23rd at 11 a.m. at Victoria Park in Halifax. It's also possible for you to rally in front of the municipal building in your town or in front of your home with the sign. And I think there are also rallies being organized around the province. So seek that out, and I hope to see you there. I don't want to forget why I'm here, and it's an AGM. So my real task is to have a quick look at the year gone by. And during that year, we celebrated a huge milestone, EAC's 50th anniversary. And one big aspect of that was 50 Things, which was an amazingly creative, classically epic EAC project. I'm sure there's people in the room who remember when we did 40 days of action for our 40th. And that was also epic. This time, we enlisted the help of artists from across Mi'kma'ki to tell the stories of the past 50 years through a variety of micro artworks, all findable through a place-based, province-wide scavenger hunt. The art pieces, which were videos, songs, graphic novels, audio stories, installations, a plethora of things, they helped us see our history in a new light. They helped us broaden our view and infuse our work with more creativity and connection and hope. So if you missed that, stay tuned. There's a reimagined version happening next month during Nocturne on October 13th. It's going to take the form of a concert and performance called Carrying the Spark. So celebrating our 50th gave EAC a rejuvenated sense of hope, connection, and clarity for the next 50 years. And it was really well timed because, as John and Christina said, we were working on updating our mission, vision, and values and shaping a new strategic direction. In that now complete strategic direction, EAC is choosing a 50-year perspective. So we're pushing ourselves to think ahead multiple generations and build towards a time of thriving and flourishing. We are committing ourselves to be on the forefront of equipping human and ecological communities for resilience and building a world where those ecosystems and communities are restored, not just sustained. Our work for the coming years will showcase what's possible, broaden and deepen engagement, and work for transformative change. So when you look back over the 21-22 year, you can see us doing just those things, doing the things that we do best, standing watch, bringing groups together for a strengthened voice, and sparking new ideas and mobilizing action. There's a real full version of the story of the year in our annual report, and I'm just gonna tell you about a few highlights. Our pop-up bike hub visited 24 communities, helped fix 931 bicycles, and collaborated with all 13 Mi'kmaq bands. In the lead up to the provincial and federal elections, we released platform analyses and resources for voters, hosted 2 debates, published op-eds, and launched a campaign that I love that called for no more BS, no more bad stuff. After decades of mobilizing, consultations, analysis, we celebrated when the province released the Environmental Goals and Climate Change Reduction Act. It lays out a renewed series of goals to protect Nova Scotia's environment and tackle the climate and biodiversity emergencies. We fought to get open net pen aquaculture out of our waters. We rallied to promote ecological forestry. We mobilized for better food systems in our province, and so much more. And that's only able to happen because of the many people and groups across Mi'kma'ki and beyond who continue to join us in this fight for a just and vibrant world of respect and belonging. We know that in the coming years, the fight will bring with it new challenges. We also know that we were made for these times. And with the energy of you, our amazing community, we're ready to face those challenges head on. Thank you so much for coming out in person. I so wish I could be there to see you and to share some snacks. Thanks so much. And this is a time, I think we have a few short moments for any questions on either the board or the ED's report.
So do we have somebody who will move acceptance of the board and ED's report? And Hannah, and your last name?
Minsloff,
Minsloff.
Minzloff.
Thank you. And a seconder? In the back there, and your name, please, with the kilt?
Oh.
Yes,
Michael McFadden.
Michael McFadden, seconding. And we can launch the virtual poll, please. And could I see a show of hands of those who approve of the board and executive director's reports? A strong show of hands. Any rejections of the report? And any abstentions? None. Okay. How's our virtual poll looking?
Looking pretty good on the
Yeah.
screen.
That's all.
Excellent. Okay, nicely done. We're keeping things on track here, David.
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Okay, so with that, I would like to hand the mic over to Rhiannon, who has kindly stepped in to deliver the financial report on behalf of IO, who is the board treasurer and is actually in Nigeria right now. So Rhiannon, mic is yours.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm a little bit smaller than you are, Christine, so I'll get to it. And I'm also wearing new progressive lenses, so I may have difficulty reading. Closer to the mic. Better? Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I would like, as Christina said, to thank IO for all of his work as treasurer over the past few years. He's helped with, along with the team, to really build wonderful reporting financially in the at least from an oversight perspective in within the EAC. But as part of the board audit and risk committee, I'm very happy to deliver this report. So first of all, and this has been alluded to, the pandemic continues to affect so many areas of our work at EIC. But despite this uncertainty, and the many activities are still continuing to happen as before, as you've heard and as you've seen in the community around you. But as you'll see in the financial statements, there are really many activities where we continue to grow. So first of all, we ended the year with an operating surplus of 414,000. This is higher than last year's. And I'll take you through why that is and how the organization intends to manage this surplus. And if I move to look at the screen, you won't hear me, so I will allow you to watch at the same time. The first thing to note is that revenues were up significantly on last year. We received $551,000 more this year than last year, a total of 3.3 million. Continued COVID subsidies from the federal government amounted to 123,000 of this. And we also saw an increase in project funding by approximately 350,000. Also notable was the increase in individual donations as people's support for the 50th birthday. So after a difficult couple of years at the start of the pandemic, it's really great that we're again seeing growth in our core revenues and stability. So meanwhile, our expenditures has gone up nearly as much, 519,000. And these increases are largely driven by increases in project funding. 1.76 million this year compared to 1.4 million last year. We've also seen a resumption of many normal working activities, so travel and office costs have increased. Largest increases in staff costs. Attracting and retaining staff is crucial for the organization to work effectively and remain competitive and live our values. And this large increase of 444,000 includes not only new staff members, but also wage increases following a salary benchmarking and equity exercise. So whilst project funds and donations have bounced back, our membership income revenues have not yet. This reflects the continued economic uncertainty the pandemic has brought. We trialed the return of the Canvas team last year, but found people hesitant either to work as a canvasser or to respond on their doorstep. This meant it was not cost effective at the time. Despite the ongoing economic uncertainty facing many of our supporters and the impact on recruitment, last year's decline in revenues of 4% compares really favorably to the previous year's decline of 8%. Membership remains a strong and crucial part of the Ecology Action Centre, and the lessons that we've learned over the last year are already proving effective for the 2022-2023 fiscal. Our income for projects is earmarked for that work, and if not needed this year, will be counted as deferred revenue and used in the subsequent year. Our deferred revenue at the end of the year is up significantly by 167,000 to 1.835 million. Whilst this does not fund all we hope to achieve through our projects in 2022 and 23, it does put us in a stronger position for the year. So what should we do with the surplus? The board has approved the transfer of 30,000 to our Fern Lane Fund to be used for the installation of a solar photovoltaic system on our roof, as well as continuing to showcase green building principles we've talked about. This provides a small but dependable income stream for the next 15 to 20 years. The board also approved the transfer of 365,000 to our strategic fund, and this fund is to be used for strategic projects or operational initiatives. Over the last 12 months, we've been developing a new strategic plan for the organization, and with that work nearly complete, we can use these funds to grow our support, increase our impact, and strengthen the organization over the next few years. Our emergency fund remains untouched. So despite the ongoing turbulence that the pandemic has caused, and in large part to the support we continue to get from our members and donors, we are in good financial position to begin to deliver on an emerging strategy. So I'll pause for a moment because that was a lot of information, and see if there are any questions. Or any questions online? Yes.
Actually, if you go back to any one of the previous slides, if possible.
Sure.
Just up in the upper left-hand corner, you say year ending 31st of March, 2021. Shouldn't that say 2022?
Indeed it should.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Thank you. We could pretend it's consistency, but.
It's the kill.
Excellent. Any other questions? Yes.
I noticed there was a slight decline in government funding or revenue. Can you explain that?
Yeah.
Do you want to take that, David?
And you need to repeat the question so that people on Zoom can hear also.
So the questioner was asking about observing. The question was asking about there's been a slight decline in government funding, and Kelly, who's in the room, who's our financial controller, will be able to correct me if this is wrong. But I think that largely reflects a reduction in Q's money. We've not got as much, didn't get as much money through Q's, and we're still receiving that money. So Q's is Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, and that was quite a chunk of cash. It was really important in 2020. That helped us get through a lot. It also led to some of quite a lot of the surplus that we had in 2020. But that's a smaller proportion of our government income this year, and it's not as much. Is that correct, Kelly? Yeah, thumbs up from Kelly, so that's good. Rowan, there's a question from online.
Yes, Ben Bigger would like to know what the emergency fund.
What's the emergency fund used for?
Nothing yet.
At the moment, it's used for things when we have something that actually needs some instant reaction and we actually have to draw down. We hadn't actually, it's actually a recognition of the strength of EAC that we didn't draw on that during the pandemic itself. But if we had, for example, faced an enormous legal action, or there was a hurricane and the roof blew off, and we, weren't able to get money from the insurers straight away, and so on. Those are the sorts of things that we may be using the emergency fund for. Is that it? Any other questions online? Any other questions in the room? Let's have a stunned silence. Complete agreement.
I'll go with the latter.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks, David. In that case, I will move to approve the 2021-2022 financial statements as presented. Is there somebody who is going to second that?
Mike McFadden.
Mike McFadden? The man in the kilt? And then we'll do a vote, both online and in person. All those in favor of the movement to approve the financial statements as presented? It looks to be here and online. Excellent. And secondly, our senior leadership, and anyone opposed or abstaining? Excellent. The senior leadership team have recommended that we continue to use BDO as our auditors next year. I would therefore like to move that we appoint BDO as our auditors for next year. Could I have somebody to second this motion? Mike, I'll take you this time, Mike Seam. All those in favor of appointing BDO as our auditors?
It'll pop up again.
Yes, I approved it and Mike seconded. Okay, I think I have a view of that, and we'll wait for the online poll to save our arms.
Right. I
Is
think
the
the
poll
poll
on,
just
Mike?
needs to be shared at the end in order to pop up for us. There it is.
Ah,
Yeah.
perfect. Excellent. Much enthusiasm. Wonderful. Anyone in opposed or abstaining? Again, unanimous. In that case, that is also moved. Thank you very, very much. And once again, thank you to Io for his services as our wonderful treasurer. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Okay, whipping along. So the next item on the agenda is the appointment of the Volunteer Board of Directors 2022-2023. And I have some more precise wording from Grant to help structure this section of the agenda. So, oops, we have a question? No, okay. So the board recruitment and nominations committee expertly launched a recruitment process some time ago for new board members, recognizing that we will have 3 board members stepping down. And we had actually a wonderful reception to that process. We had a whole bunch of people interested in joining the board, which is very exciting. This committee then undertook a process to review the applications and interview the top candidates, and have landed on 7 new individuals to join our board. And you can see them there on the slide. So the process here, we are only asking you to vote to appoint the new board members, and those are going to be nominated as a group. We're not asking you to vote to reappoint the board members whose terms are not up yet. So before you, we have the 7 individuals who we are seeking to, yes, David? 6. Who? 6 individuals. I saw that screen over there. I thought it was, that's just my face. That's the back of my head. Okay, 6 individuals, still a very hefty, exciting number. And I'm not actually sure if any of them are able to join us in the room today. Yes, okay, excellent. So we have Keith in the room. Keith, do you mind standing up, please? So Keith McMaster is one of the individuals who we are seeking to appoint. Do you have any other in the room? Here we are, Roland. Welcome, Roland. Please, if you wouldn't mind standing. Wonderful that you could join us both in person. Anyone else in the room or virtually? Can we spotlight any?
So if you're there virtually, you can turn your camera on.
Helga or Laurette or Haruka or Marion? It's possible they're facing technical difficulties. We'll give them a minute perhaps to spotlight. So we have these 6 wonderful individuals who we are seeking to appoint to join the board tonight. There are a couple small changes, and this is hence my confusion about the 7th individual. So we actually had Blanche Israel was going to be joining the board or going to be seeking to be appointed to the board tonight, but for family reasons, Blanche has decided to defer her appointment to 2023. So we'll be looking for her at the AGM next year, which we're all very excited about. And then one small update too is that Keith is going to be taking a short contract with the Ecology Action Center. So he will officially join the board once any conflict of interest issues have passed. So those are the 2 updates that Maggie asked me to share with you tonight. So without further ado, I think I'd like to make a motion to approve the list of directors as proposed, the new directors as proposed. Yes, Lisa?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure if you were.
You're
Okay.
moving? Whatever I'm doing, yes,
Yes.
I'm doing it.
Okay.
I'm doing it, yes.
Excellent. So Lisa is moving and we have Ray seconding.
Great.
And this also requires a vote, so we'll launch the vote. We've got a virtual vote is running. All in favor of? Yes, excellent. We've got a resounding yes to all our wonderful new board members. Any abstentions? No. Okay. Thank you. Wonderful. Roland and Keith, wonderful to have you here. And for the others who are joining virtually, we're really excited for all of you to be joining us here. And we've got, I think probably at least from the flurry of emails that has been sent around the past couple of weeks, like at least 3 or 4 meetings in the next month that we've signed you up for. So we'll get you onboarded, lickety split, and hit the ground running. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So following on that, we've got new board members joining, and we have current board members retiring. And so I'd like to take a moment now to appreciate our 3 individuals who are stepping down from the board because they've fulfilled their terms. So those 3 people are Io Makanjuola, who is our treasurer. And I don't know if Io was able to join virtually or not. He's currently in Nigeria. The second individual who I would like to acknowledge is former co-chair Anne-Marie Dalton, who is in the room with us tonight. Anne-Marie. And the third individual is co-chair John Price, who you will see spotlighted on the And Io joined the board in 2018, Anne Marie joined in 2017, and John joined in 2016. So between the three of them, that amounts to 18 years of service on the Ecology Action Centre board, which is quite an incredible thing to consider. And so, of course, it's not just the time that's remarkable, but it's also the quality of their service to this organization. And I joined in 2019, and so I've had the opportunity, mostly virtual, to get to know Io and Anne Marie and John. And I wanted to share a few personal words about my experience working with them on the board. Starting with Anne Marie, who is here. Anne Marie, you served as a co-chair for your 6 years on the board. And I think just your, what I admired so much about you was your quiet grace in leadership, but also a steely certainty, which is a steely clear certainty, which is so critical for a board leader. You also served on the governance committee there and provided your expertise to governance matters that are so critical to the successful functioning of this organization. And what I also really appreciate about you is when we were able to create those generative spaces, you never hesitated to leap into philosophical discussion. And so often we didn't have enough time, I think, as a board to really get into it. I'm sure I would have loved to have heard you speak for much longer. You always had wonderfully thoughtful things to share there. Certainly you were really an essential person at steering the Ecology Action Centre through some troubled times when it came to leadership, and working with John as co-chair to install Maggie as the executive director of the organization. And I know that your clarity of purpose there was really essential for the organization during that hard time. And then when you stepped down to allow me to step into the co-chair role, I really appreciated all the support you offered me, and also your willingness to let me step into this role and to provide quiet support from behind the scenes. So thank you very much, Anne Marie, for that. Io provided his incredible financial expertise to the organization. I don't know how many versions of budgets he got to review with the senior leadership team and financial team at the Ecology Action Centre over the years. What I saw in Io was an incredible meticulous scrutiny, and which is essential for matters of finance. He steered the organization or collaborated with key staff to steer the organization through some of the very challenging financial questions that we were faced through the early days of the COVID pandemic and the tail end that we're still experiencing. He helped us make key decisions when it came to how we managed our reserves. You saw there we have reserves in various funds now, and Io's expertise was critical in helping us make those decisions. He steered us through the process of obtaining a new auditor. And what I appreciated most about Io was he always had an incredibly thoughtful question or two, careful listener, and then wonderful questions, not just financial. His interest and commitment to the organization extended beyond financial. And then he also had a wonderful ability to present complex financial documents very clearly to folks who don't have that same level of savvy, including myself. So it's been a wonderful pleasure to work with Io as well. And last but not least, John Crace, who started with the board in 2016, which does feel like a very long time ago now. John, many things I admired about John. One of them was he never shied away from asking the hard questions over and over again, and be the devil's advocate, which is really important when the board and staff come together. is to be the person who asks those hard questions and challenges us all to think critically about the path forward. John, I appreciated especially his ability to encourage us as a board to find the line between being too in the weeds. As a governance board, we do have to stay high level, but John really challenged us to find that line between too in the weeds and knowing and also having to have the information we needed in order to fulfill our responsibilities and make informed decisions. And so there's a tension there. And I think John really over his time there helped us find that middle ground. As co-chair, I've served with co-chair with John for the past 2 years, and what I think above all I've appreciated about that experience is John's is an incredibly willing listener, a careful listener, and genuinely committed to co-creation, co-development, and he's been very supportive in working with me as a fledgling co-chair, but I've generally felt that it was an equal partnership in all the things that we've undertaken together, John, including most recently evaluating our wonderful executive director, Maggie Burns, and she passed with flying colors, by the way. So I know that I speak for the board and the senior leadership team and all the staff at the Ecology Action Center and the members when I say how much we've appreciated all 3 of your contributions to the organization over the years, as well as deeply enjoying our time together. You will be missed, the 3 of you, but you're all people on the move. And we know that wherever you go, you're going to be working your magic in the other places that need it. And most importantly, you'll be taking the spirit of the Ecology Action Center with you. So please join me wherever you are in showing your appreciation for Anne-Marie, Io, and John. And we have some gifts. We have lovely gifts. Anne-Marie, would you like to come up as the board member in person here to accept your gift? Is this all for Anne-Marie?
Yes, so John and I will need to come get there. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
On behalf of all of us here at the Ecology Action Center, thank you so much, Anne-Marie.
Thank you very much, Christina, and all of you on behalf of 3 of us who are sort of leaving, at least from the board. We'll still be around the Ecology Action Center, I'm sure, at least I will. And so I want to say thank you to everybody I worked with over the last 6 years, and all the cooperation, and especially to the staff, but also to the board that we work with. Everybody's been amazingly cooperative, inspiring, made life worth living in many ways. Thank you.
And one of the things that I know John and his family have been busy doing is collecting, harvesting from his bountiful garden and creating beautiful jelly. And John has asked me on his behalf to gift each one of the departing board members a wonderful jar of jelly. So Anne-Marie, here's your jelly, and we've got jelly for Io and oh my goodness, Io and John, yeah, John, right, that's why. John's got his own jelly. John's got plenty of jelly. There we go, Anne-Marie. Okay. All right, so I think it's over to you, Maggie, then, for the next item on the agenda.
So I think Maggie's in the room, well, not in the room, but online.
And we switched up order. That's why we're here.
Switched up order, yeah. it's time to give some recognition to, well, we talked about just now 18 years of experience. We have 40 years worth of service to the Ecology Action Centre from 3 long-standing staff to celebrate tonight. So we have Julia Pollock, Rowan Swain, and Ray. Shall I start with talking about Julia?
You can do Julia and I'll talk about the other two.
Okay, so Julia Pollock's been with us for 10 years. And I want to say a few words about Julia. She's not here tonight. I think she's not online because now is the time for getting the little ones to bed. And that is not a routine to break. We all know that, or many of us do. Not even for an AGM. And so I shall sing her praises now and fittingly not embarrass her directly with praise in the limelight, because Julia is someone who is not at her happiest when she's in the limelight. She is a dependable person who has been so valuable to us over the last 10 years. But by embarrassing her now remotely, that gratitude will find its way back to her through some of you. So feel free to pass on that thanks to her when you see her next. That people are kind and caring, she told me, is what she values most about EAC. And that's actually a quality that she has plenty of as well. That's why she's got bedtime with the little ones tonight. I suspect it's also probably true for many of us here that is one of the things that really makes EAC special. Julia is our ever reliable and rock solid accounting manager. She leads the work of processing invoices, keeping our books up to date and making sure we all get paid. Every dollar, yes, every dollar that was on those finance tables has been put in the right place at the right time by Julia and her team. Hello, Helen, if you're here or if you're online. Helen works very closely with Julia as part of the finance team that Julia leads. I know that thinking about those finance tables and how many numbers there were on there, that shows the scale and importance of the work Julia does for EAC. But she's more than a rock solid accounting manager. I asked her this evening what else she'd done in her time at EAC. Normally at these things you ask other people what they've done during their time at EAC, so you can tell someone's story. But as she wasn't going to be here, I thought it was okay to ask her directly. And initially I didn't get much of a response, but she told me about some of the other things that she'd been doing in her time in the last 10 years. And she said, well, it was at the time I was painting the walls. Well, actually, I built a wall and I did some baking for volunteers and I delivered magazines and I upgraded the website once. And actually, the list kept going of all of the incredibly diverse things. And I said, so really, Julia's more of EAC Swiss Army knife with a finance module upgrade. So thank you so much, Julia, not just for making sure we get paid, but for all those thousands of contributions you have made for us over the last decade. Thank you, Julia.
I'm Marla McLeod. I'm Director of Programs here at Ecology Action Center, and I have the great pleasure of getting to recognize two others of our amazing staff here. So, Sept, Rowan, Swain, who's at the back, making everything work. And Rowan is one of the voices of the Ecology Action Center. He also has worn many hats during his 10 years with the organization, starting out as a canvasser on our membership team, working the phones for several years as a member relations officer, and now is on our comms team. Overwhelmingly, it's his talents as a communicator that have helped really build this EAC community. He has crafted many a fiery press release, a thoughtful email, a brilliant op-ed. He has spoken with many hundreds of members, sorted out a plethora of thorny database issues, mentored dozens of colleagues, and I know we all sound better because Rowan is with us. And I think there was actually even a moment when Facebook decided that the Ecology Action Center was in fact just Rowan's name. And then he also fixed that problem. So we are all deeply, deeply grateful for Rowan. He's got a huge depth of experience, an upbeat perspective, and a steady presence that make him a fantastic teammate. He's also a great musician, an activist who keeps us grounded in our radical vision, and a stellar writer whose powers as a wordsmith make us all shine. And so, Rowan, we cannot thank you enough, but we do thank you, and there will be cake also. Thank you, Rowan. And last, but most decidedly not least, Ray Lord, EAC's fearless wilderness campaigner, who likely needs no introduction, especially in this room, is celebrating 20 years. It is truly amazing what Ray can accomplish. And today he has accomplished his 20-year anniversary as an EAC employee. So Ray, we collected a few well wishes and accolades from your admirers. It got a little bit out of hand, but we can't resist sharing. So first up is a story from a longtime EAC member and environmentalist, Graham Smith, who says, Ray and I both enjoy fly fishing and have spent many happy hours together along rivers. One particular day with Ray comes to mind. In looking for him near the river, I spotted his boots sticking out from the undergrowth. Ray was still in them. As I approached, I could see what he was doing, taking beautiful close-up photographs of the insect life that exists in the tiny droplets of liquid that are cupped in the lady slippers that occur in the forest. This shows where Ray's devotion and interest lie. And fishing, yes, but as a step into the natural world. So we have a few more of these as well. So there's no question that Ray is also a brilliant strategist and media spokesperson. Joan Baxter, author and journalist, wrote, wow, 20 years and still going strong. Good on you, Ray. It is also wonderful that you're there to provide insights for articles and also powerful quotes, and often at very short notice. I think we all know that Ray has a truly generous heart. Many of us have benefited from the bounty of his secret fiddlehead patch, his insightful government relations advice, or his media coaching. Another quote from another former EACer, former EAC membership coordinator, Heather McKibben, says, I'll always remember your unwavering support, Ray. You regularly demonstrated your appreciation for our incredible membership. Through your work, you've exemplified the very nature of who we are, and I'm fortunate to have learned from and alongside you. And most importantly for the creatures, people, and biodiversity of Nova Scotia, Ray makes things happen. Through tireless work, through his impressive networks, community, government, media, and more, and through huge amounts of expertise and care, Ray has made a huge difference in this province. And so one last quote, former EAC policy director, Mark Butler, puts it well. Says, the other night I was fishing with Ray. There was a young boy on the wharf who took an interest in what we were doing. As we left, Ray gave him one of his mackerel lures to help the boy in his fishing journey. I think about Ray's work in a similar way. Through his efforts to protect and conserve nature, he is providing a special gift to future generations, be it a stunning protected area or clean air and water for the people of Pictou and Pictou Land. So thanks, Ray, and congratulations, Ray. We're lucky to have you. Ray and Rowan, do you want to come up for the I don't know what happens if we let Rowan loose.
Zoom will fall apart. No. Here we go.
Oh, I'm not saying anything. For the record, I was told to pick a silly picture, but apparently no one else got that.
I think it's a very handsome picture.
Good looking fellow.
He flips this side.
I won't take too much time. Thank you very much. That was very sweet. Especially those quotes from folks that I've had the pleasure of working with over 20 years at Ecology Action Center, and there's been many. And you know, they were all part of the family and remain part of the family, and I'm really very impressed with the current group that we have. It's really strong and getting stronger after a really uncertain time. So I won't take up too much time. I'm fully capable. I guess I just want to say that I'm very proud to have been associated with this organization for 20 years. It's the longest I've ever worked for anyone by 4 times. And I wouldn't have traded a day of it. It's a special group. It's a fluid group. It's a reflection of the best of our society, I think, here in Mi'kma'ki and Nova Scotia. And I'm very proud to have been a part of it. If you're curious, Mark Butler has the record, 23 years. I checked with him when we were fishing the other night. Yeah, it was nice to bring a new kid into fishing. He didn't know what we were doing. I threw his rod, showed him how to do it. He caught a few fish. He was very happy, and then I gave him the lure so he could go and hook it up to his own rod. And I've done that many times with kids, just in fishing or in like nature, getting down on the ground and looking at things. And I think that that's always a really special thing to do. I don't know if every one of them will reverberate, but I think some of them do. And that's kind of how I came into it, was loving nature and so on and so forth. So I just want to say that, you know, the thing I think I'm most proud of in terms of accomplishment is that when I started this work, and I was 5 years, 6 years a volunteer before becoming a staff member of EAC. So it's really 25, 26 years. We were at 3% protection of our land base here in Nova Scotia, our 2 national parks. And today we're at almost 13%, and we have commitments to get to 20% within the next 8 years. And I think that's the legacy piece that I'll feel most proud of, because those places are legally protected from any form of development forever. And it was mentioned earlier that we have gone through and are still, I think, going through some dark times. You know, the pandemic threatened to wipe the environment off the map. But we managed to remain relevant in a difficult and disconnected time. And I'm very proud of everybody at EAC for being able to do that and to continue our work and then strengthen it and emerge even stronger. In dark times, I look for points of light, you know, for inspiration or what have you. And I can't help but think of one that happened just yesterday. Yvon Chouinard, the founder and president of Patagonia, one of the largest corporations of its kind, outdoor equipment, we all know Patagonia, essentially took his entire business and donated it to a charitable setup that he created to give to organizations like our own and many others in and around the world. That's what climate leadership, the kind we need now, looks like, right? Real leaders stepping up and doing something significant. And that was personally, well, I think for everybody, it's impressive, and hopefully other billionaires will follow. But I had the pleasure of meeting Yvon on a couple of occasions, one of them fishing, and the other one, Graham Smith, one of the members, longstanding members, who was quoted a few minutes ago. We got to break bread with Yvon and talk to him about his commitment to the environment and so on and so forth. And he really is the genuine article, and he literally put his money where his mouth is, every cent of it yesterday. And I hope that we see more of that, because that's, like I said, the kind of leadership we need. The other point of light I would like to highlight is just the students, the youth who are coming up and starting to take their place and take the leadership and trying to wake up the so-called adults in the room. That's a real point of light. And a few years ago, before COVID kind of gave us a body slam for a while, they organized, and we're pleased to help a massive march in Halifax that really did galvanize things and seize the political mind at least long enough to get some commitments, and we need to follow through. And so, like Maggie, I want to emphasize everybody in the room, online, I hope that you can come if you're able to next Friday to hopefully match that 10,000 number and maybe exceed it, but at least make a good showing and support our young people in the upcoming climate march. Friday, next Friday, Victoria Park at 11 a.m. We are finally allowed to gather. Let's gather in strength and numbers and support those kids, because they are literally the future, and they're staring at the future in the face, and they are tomorrow's leaders. We need to support them and make a strong showing. So thank you to my EAC family for the acknowledgement, and I look forward to continuing the mission with all of you. Thank you.
You also get a thing.
Incidentally, if people haven't seen this, Nova Scotia needs rain. That sign appeared one day in Ray's garden. And that was a great surprise, because of course, yes, Nova Scotia needs rain. I think we move on now to the EAC awards. I think that's next. So we'll get back onto the next slide, and over to you, Jo.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Oh, now I can see all of your faces. That's great. So nice to have the AGM in person again. So nice to be with you all. So my name is Joanna Bull, and I am EAC's Community Engagement Manager. So I have a couple of fun jobs tonight. But just a quick note on the community engagement. Last year, when we celebrated our 50th, one of the things that was so amazing was thinking about all of the different groups and organizations and people who have been part of and who are part of our environmental movement in Mi'kma'ki at EAC and beyond, and all the tentacles that reach out. And especially, when you zoom out to the broader movements that are so interconnected, but working for a better future in different angles, it really is amazing. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about in relation to that is the Madeline Grant. So the Madeline Grant is a new fund that has been gifted to Ecology Action Center by an anonymous donor. It is a $5,000 grant that will be awarded annually to an EAC project who's working directly with community groups in order to help strengthen and support Nova Scotia grassroots community advocacy in the fight to protect the communities and natural spaces that we all love and cherish. So why is there a falcon on the screen? The reason is that our donor was inspired largely by the work of Kip McCurdy, who devoted a great deal of time to stewarding the return of the peregrine falcon to the Bay of Fundy area 25 years ago. And I'm seeing a couple people nod. Some of you know about this story. And Madeline was apparently the name of the first falcon that Kip found who had returned. So that's what the grant is named after. So this grant is going to support specific partnerships between the EAC and grassroots community groups who we work with, and really focus on capacity building for communities. It's going to be allocated to a different project every year, depending on where we see that greatest potential impact to strengthen that grassroots community advocacy at the time. And this is really exciting because, as many people have said, really the foundation for the success of our environmental movement is in that grassroots. Which is also, our power, it comes from people mobilizing together, which is also why membership is so important. So thank you for being part of that. And it's really wonderful to have these resources that are dedicated to help us strengthen and better support and partner with those grassroots community efforts that are sometimes on the fringes of the kinds of grants that we get from other places. So this year, in the first year, the grant is going to go to support the work of the Healthy Bays Network, which is a network of local groups who've been organizing for several years around getting those polluting open net pen finfish aquaculture things out of our Nova Scotian bays. And so there's a review coming up, and the Healthy Bays Network are embarking on a deeply engaged process to support coastal communities and having their voices heard in the upcoming regulatory review. So they're going to be doing kitchen table conversations and local public speaking events to really discuss what communities' concerns are about aquaculture and supporting folks to be really well equipped to have their voices heard in the review. So we're hoping that that effort will be really impactful and be a splash that the government cannot ignore, that they finally hear the message that we need to transition away from those kinds of sea cage fish farms altogether in Atlantic Canada. So it's very exciting, and the Madeline Grant is going to help make that happen. Wonderful. So I see there's lots of enthusiasm for this in the room. And so even more exciting is that if you're inspired by this idea of this fund and the way that it can support grassroots work, you can contribute to it also. And if Paula would like to raise her hand, you can go and talk to her if you would like to chip in for the Madeline Fund. Okay, now we're going to move on to EAC's annual awards to help recognize some of those amazing community groups that we keep talking about. So this has been a tradition at EAC's AGM since the early 80s to recognize the best and the worst of the year when it comes to the environment. So some of you are familiar with this. How it works is that our staff and board members submit nominations for each award category, and then we vote on who we think is the most deserving. So I think we've invited all of the winners to this AGM. I think some of you may be in the room tonight. Some of you may be joining virtually, and we'll all find out who's who as I say your name. So we'll start with the baddies first, and then we'll move on to the warm fuzzies after. It's good to start with bad news, I think they say. So first off is the Tarred Duck Award, which is presented to a group or individual who has acted in violation of environmental values or advocated for economic development without consideration of the environment. Boo to that. So in third place, boo, there we go. Yeah, you got it. Third place, we have Paraday Energy. Boo. They get this award for taking advantage of the narratives around the war in Ukraine to once again push for their proposed LNG export terminal, which EAC has been fighting against for, I think, at least 12 years. If it was built, the project would cause a massive increase in Nova Scotia's greenhouse gas emissions, and it would make it almost impossible to meet our climate targets. It would also create more infrastructure to support potential fracked gas development. So, boo for Paraday. Next, in second place, Cook Aquaculture. A couple of things. They sneakily built a new open net pen right on top of a site that was lapsed for a long time in St. Mary's Bay, and they did no new consultation with the public. They also had a really big sea lice outbreak in one of their Annapolis Basin sites during the fall salmon migration season, and they hid it. They only told the public when they were forced to admit it in front of the Aquaculture Review Board in November. That is so shady, Cook Aquaculture. Shame on you. And in first place, our baddie of the year is Atlantic Gold. Very enthusiastic boos coming from Karen McKendry and Ruby Handling in the back, who fight these folks every day. This is for their relentless lobbying for more large, destructive, and polluting open pit gold mines in the Eastern Shore and all over the province, and their expansion of their existing open pit gold mine at Moose River. It would be great if these guys could just stop and we could get on with the rest of the exciting work that we want to do, but instead we've got to fight them all the time. So they are our first place winner this year for the Tarred Duck Award. Boo, Atlantic Gold. And we have
their reward.
Well, we have their certificates here, and I think we'll mail them to them later since none of them were able to come tonight. Yeah. There's a story about someone once framing a Tarred Duck Award. I don't know if that's true or if it's an urban legend, but okay. Now we move on to the happier things. So the Danielle Moore Sunshine Award is given to a group or individual who has made a particularly effective effort in an environmental issue in Nova Scotia during the prior year. And a couple of years ago, we renamed this award in honor of Danielle Moore. Some of you may have known Danielle. She was a bright light who had a truly incredible impact on the environmental movement in Nova Scotia and beyond. And her time with us was tragically cut short in the Ethiopian Airlines crash in 2019. She was on her way to a United Nations environmental conference at the age of 24. So this award honors those who carry Danielle's legacy of brave, enthusiastic, optimistic action on behalf of our environment. So there were lots of wonderful nominees in this category this year. In third place, we have the folks at the Last Hope Camp, which you may have heard of. They camped out for, I actually should have the number, but I think over 275 days. Very creative and persistent and successful resistance to protect a patch of old growth forest near Beals Brook that was scheduled to be clear cut. And it's right in the middle of moose habitat. They were very creative in finding some rare lichens. And I love this story because they brought a lichenologist and they found rare lichen species, and every rare lichen that was endangered needed to have a 100-meter buffer around it that couldn't be cut. And they found enough of them that it was no longer economically viable for Westport to cut the thing. So the lichen stayed for that. So if you ever think you're too small or gray looking or like, subtle to make a difference, just remember that story of the lichens in the Last Hope Camp. We invited some of them. I didn't hear back from anybody, but if anybody from that effort is online, Nina Newington and all of the rest of those folks, you have our heartfelt gratitude for doing that important frontline work. That EAC can't do things like blockades because we're a charity, but when these folks have done it, it's been very, very successful and effective. In second place, we'd like to recognize the Sandy Lake Sackville River Regional Park Coalition. Yay! And I don't know, Karen Robinson is here with us tonight in person. Yes, there you are. It's hard to know people with the masks. Hi, Karen. And there's other folks too, Walter Regan and Mary Ellen Donovan. Karen McKendry, of course, our own. David Patrick Quinn, yes. Sorry, who? Ray, who's on the board of it. Yeah, so a real coalition effort who've been really tirelessly working to protect this really important area in Sandy Lake Sackville River. And this past year has been a real battle thanks to the province's housing task force, who has fast-tracked it for housing development. They were a contender. The coalition rose to the occasion and they alerted more people than ever to the things that are really worth protecting in that area. And they've managed to do some really great work with the city to commission and listen to a third-party ecological study. So we're hoping that makes a big difference. And I do have your certificate. And since you're here, you could come up if you would like to get it. On behalf of our group, thank you. Thank you so much. I've forgotten how to hand certificates to people. Sorry, that was. It's been a little while. In first place this year for the Danielle Moore Sunshine Award is the Save Owl's Head group. Oh. And Lindsay Lee, I believe, is joining us virtually. Yes. But so glad that you're able to be here, even if we can't see your face. And on behalf of that group of an incredible network of people around the province who managed to secure the protection of those 266 hectares of Crown land, it was announced on June 14th after many, many months of well-organized public engagement and advocacy. Well done to you. We'll send you your certificate. Okay, how am I doing for time, David? I'm okay, great. Okay, next up is the Bubby Moores Award. So Bubby Moores was a carpenter and a folk artist and an active EAC member who gave generously of his time and talents. Our annual garden party auction, which some of you maybe remember attending some years ago, he often donated his artwork to that. And so the Bubby Moores Award is given to an individual or a group who has given of themselves, either over time or in the past year, to environmental issues in Nova Scotia and to the EAC in particular. So this often goes to our near and dear volunteers. And in second place this year, again, it is Karen Robinson for her tireless leadership of the Sandy Lake Conservation Society. She's been advocating for the conservation of Sandy Lake, Jack Lake, and Marsh Lake area in the Bedford and Hammond Plains as an expanded regional park and HRM, and has been fighting against urban sprawl development, which threatens this area for many years. And we've all benefited from your leadership and your dedication to that. So thank you once again, Karen. Did I make you come up again, do you think?
Yeah.
All right, come on up. Yeah, we'll try and do this right this time. I think it goes right here. Here we go. I think Matt is at the back taking pictures. There we go. And in first place for the Bubby Moores Award is Joe Dennis, who is joining us on Zoom. Joe is from the Sydney area up in Cape Breton, and Joe has lived by and cared for the Washbrook for over 70 years. As a longtime member of the Baileyard Trails Association and a director with the Washbrook Greenway Coalition, Joe has continuously given back to the natural space that has provided him with so much over the years. He has spent decades of his life volunteering time and labor and insightful guidance to projects that get people outside and connecting with nature and learning how to protect it. Joe is a quiet but influential leader, diligently working to build bridges, both literally and figuratively. And Joe, you were nominated, as you know, by our dear Stephanie Johnstone-Lorette, who's been one of our remote staff members up in Cape Breton for a long time. So thank you so much for your years and years of great service. We'll see that Stephanie says that Joe may be having some issues with his computer, so we don't know if you're here, Joe, but we'll send you the recording along with your certificate. Okay, and last but not least, we have the Tooker Gomberg Award. So Tooker Gomberg was a Canadian political and environmental activist known across Canada for his clever and effective advocacy toward environmental justice and also his media charisma. So he had something called the Golden Turkey Awards. He once buried a car. He dressed up as Robin Hood and went to the Toronto Stock Exchange. He was really brilliant at garnering media attention and a really inspiring individual. So as with Tooker as our green inspiration, which is a word that he coined, I believe, the Tooker Gomberg Award goes to the person or event that most creatively and brilliantly and effectively made the news this past year. And this year is unusual for the Tooker Gomberg Award because we are dedicating this award collectively to a group of organizations. So when we looked at the nominations, you can tell it's almost time for me to stop talking, right? When we looked at the nominations in this category, they were all groups and organizations who've been working on the front lines of our housing crisis. And housing is an increasingly important issue right now, as we all know, but especially in the context of a worsening climate crisis, housing is pretty important. So we want to recognize the connections between, affordability in housing and safe housing with all of the environmental issues that we work on. And so this year we are dedicating the Tooker Gomberg Award to Out of the Cold, Halifax Mutual Aid, the PADS Network, and Add Some House, and other members of the affordable housing movement for collectively and continuously shining a spotlight on Halifax's current housing crisis, effectively keeping the issue in the public discourse so we all had to pay attention, and taking care of our unhoused neighbors day and night, 24 hours, all year long. And as I said, safe, affordable housing is an increasingly important issue, especially in the climate crisis. So our struggles are deeply interconnected and the solutions are interconnected too. We all know we need to shift our systems away from caring about profit before all else and get back to a foundation of radical care, both for our human communities and our more than human communities. So I would like to just, with all of the admiration in my heart for the work that you all do. And I believe Michelle Millette is joining us online, and she is from Out of the Cold, and Sherry Lecker from Add Some House also. And so we extend our appreciation to you. And that's it for me, for the annual awards. Thank you all so much.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Back to me. Thanks, Joanna. I always love the annual awards, such a inspiring moment in the year. And now for another one, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker tonight, and that's Dr. Gaynor Watson-Creed. She's joining us tonight virtually and will be speaking on lessons from the pandemic, what environmentalists can learn from public health regarding individual and collective resilience and the work of systems change. So Dr. Watson-Creed is a public health specialist physician. She was the medical officer of health for the Halifax area for 12 years. In November 2017, she became the Deputy Chief Medical Officer of Health for Nova Scotia and served in that role until 2021. So a historic time, as we all know. Dr. Watson-Creed is a passionate advocate for the role of public health in advancing health equity, an environmentalist in her personal and professional spheres, and someone with a strong systems change lens. She's currently the Associate Dean of Serving and Engaging Society for Dalhousie University's Faculty of Medicine. She's also past chair of the board of Engage Nova Scotia and a member of the recently completed Federal Task Force on Women in the Economy. Gaynor's a highly regarded physician and community member with many awards to her name, so many that I'm not even going to begin to list them, and I'll simply turn the mic over to her with our thanks. We're so pleased to have you join us, Gaynor.
Thank you, Maggie, for that introduction, and hello, EAC. I'm joining you from Anishinaabe Algonquin territory in Ottawa tonight, where I am for meetings. So sorry that I can't be there in person, but really pleased to get this invitation from the EAC via Maggie to present at your AGM tonight, which, by the way, has been a hoot. I really have always had a lot of admiration for the EAC and the work that you do, the commitment that you have in particular to evidence-based work. I find really admirable, and I love how much fun you are having with it as well. I could have listened to the awards presentations, I think, seriously, for another hour. They were amazing, so thank you for that. I'm also going to say a quick nod to Maggie, who I realize I have known for something like 3 decades. Maggie, it's been that long. When we were both young, starry-eyed political activists, and apparently we're still at least the starry-eyed piece, because there you are, and here I am still doing some of that activism work. So lovely to have this this connection. I'm gonna share my screen, if that's okay. And I do have a presentation. It's more like a guide for me, so nothing, there will be no exam. There's nothing particularly compelling, I don't think, that you need to take from this. As a matter of fact, those of you who work with Maggie more than I do probably know how skilled she is at this. She assigned the title to me, and I said to her, oh my God, I don't think public health can teach environmentalists anything. It might need to be the other way around. So what I'm going to suggest instead is that I'll actually just offer you a few points to consider about how we deal with, the many complex issues that are in front of us today, and certainly environmental issues are at the top of that. And they're related to these questions, certainly, that I'm holding about how we see the world, maybe not from a values perspective, more from a question of how do we sort of expose the empiric truth around how the world actually is, so that we can be empowered to change it for the world that we actually want. And so I don't have any of the usual disclosures, so I'll just put that out of the way right now. But before I get into the talk, I do want to just back up and give you maybe a broader sense of public health, in case your first introduction to public health and the work that somebody like me as a public health physician might do has been through COVID-19, because although that has been quite instructive, I'm not sure it's been our best demonstration of what public health work is. So I want to make clear what that actually is, and how and why it ties to the environment, at least from my perspective. So I had the benefit of co-licensing when I did my residency training after medical school in family medicine and public health at the same time. So public health is a 5-year training program. I took the first 2 years of that and deliberately licensed as a family doctor, and then started working as a family doctor as I completed my residency training in public health. I have to say that the training programs hate it when residents do that, and they try and discourage it as much as possible. But anyway, I got away with it. And so practiced family medicine until 2009. And at the time, I remember thinking during my family medicine training and during life as a family physician, wow, family medicine is big. I mean, everybody sort of has had this experience of being to a family doctor or a walk-in clinic, and you have a sense of how that flows, right? So those physicians are going to see, 20, 25, 30 people in the run of a day. They may not know everything that's coming in the day before it shows up, and they could go from things like giving immunizations to a new baby, to doing a prenatal visit, to doing a mental health counseling visit, to removing somebody's sutures, to checking in on somebody's diabetes status. And so it's a really varied day that hits a family doctor at any given point in time. And often they will have a sense during that visit of what they need to do with that patient to move their health to the next level, and how to make a difference on that level. And if they reach the limits of their practice as a family doctor, they know where to go, which is to reach out to the specialist community, so that the specialist might get involved in that patient's care, and hopefully together with the specialist, the patient and the family doctor and the specialist can come up with a game plan. And I'm maybe presenting a bit of an idealized picture too of family medicine, but that in general is the theory, and that is how we teach family medicine to new trainees. And so when I practiced family medicine, I always knew a few things. One is I knew I was going to have a lot of variety, but the second is I always knew what the limits of my practice would be, and I knew who to reach to when I got that. And then I got into public health, and I realized a few things. One was, in family medicine, I was interested in anything that made any of those individuals sick on any given day, and my obligation was to do something that hopefully restored them to some level of health or function that they may previously have had. As a public health physician, I have never been interested in anything that makes individuals sick. Full stop. But I am always interested in what makes them sick in groups, or what has the potential to make them sick in groups. And that is always the entry point for public health into any conversation. And if you think about that potential, it is massive. So if you had asked me if I had to know anything about grade 12 graduation rates, I would have said, I'm not certain that's relevant to medicine. Oh, wait, grade 12 graduation with math and literacy skills in the language of your choice is actually one of the most impactful determinants of health, far more impactful than availability of and access to healthcare systems. Okay, so over my career, I have spent an interesting amount of time dealing with school board officials, for example, on issues that are preventing kids from getting that grade 12 diploma and preventing kids in groups from getting those grade 12 diplomas. If you'd asked me if I had to know anything about engineering of roads, I would have said, well, that's engineering. Oh no, that's injury prevention. So if you can engineer the roads, the physical environment, in a way that you actually remove the risk of that physical environment to humans, then you prevent those humans from ending up in family doctors' offices or emergency rooms. So I have spent an inordinate amount of time at tables with city planners, with architects, with city engineers, and I have loved every minute of it. It's been fantastic. And so you start to see that intersect between the built environment and public health. And if you had asked me anything about whether or not I needed to know anything about the life cycle of mosquito, I probably would have said, I don't like bugs. And I'm not sure that I want to be an infectious diseases physician, except that if you can prevent those insects and other vectors from acquiring the diseases that they might actually pass on to humans, you will prevent the humans from getting those diseases, right? And so the health of those insect populations, animal populations matters a lot to public health in a variety of ways. And so you start to see that there are huge intersections between public health practice and the environment. And so although Maggie introduced me as an environmentalist in my personal life, I would say I am I am an aspirant. I try, I fail frequently, but I keep trying. But certainly in my public health life, the intersections between the environment and public health are well understood and have certainly been a focus of some of my work. And so the way I describe that work of public health now is, so I've talked to you about, sort of that obligation to stand in front of the things that have the potential to make human populations sick in groups. And public health's job is to systematically identify where those health outcomes are happening in groups, the differences between group A and group B, and that shouldn't say dispose, that should say expose them for the purposes of resolving them. So exposing not only that the difference is there, but the reasons that the difference exists, so that we can get those reasons onto policy tables that actually change things. And so if you think about that work, it is massive. I thought I knew the boundaries of family medicine practice. I do not yet know the boundaries of public health practice. I'm not sure there are boundaries to public health practice. You can almost think of anything as a public health issue when you put it in that context. And it's for that reason that public health systems are aligned with government systems around the world, is because when you reach the end of that rope and there is nowhere else to go, you need the weight and reach of government into communities and populations to support the interventions that need to be at hand. And as I heard you talking today through your AGM, I recognize that same need to have the attention of government officials on the issues that matter, that can prevent those outcomes, environmental and health outcomes, for whole populations. So you start to see that the formal public health system and the environmental movement have coexisted for centuries. And in fact, the emergence of epidemiology, the founding science of public health practice, actually is rooted in an environmental crisis. That was the cholera outbreak of London in the 1800s, and Dr. John Snow's work tracking that to contaminated drinking water in that city. And if you think about other public health crises that have emerged since then, including the COVID-19 crisis, we recognize that the coexistence of animal and human populations in an unsustainable way is frequently the setup for, in particular, communicable disease outbreaks that threaten both sets of populations. And so in 2015, the Canadian Public Health Association actually put out this discussion paper on the ecological determinants of health, with the model on the right-hand side of the page attached to it, clearly demonstrating that, of course, when you're thinking about those public health outcomes that are so broad, you cannot get away from also thinking about issues of ecology, of social and economic change, and ultimately of population health. So just want to recognize the common ground that we share. And so I think some of the other common ground we share is around this idea that the world is currently not the one that any of us wishes that we had. Or in many ways, it's not what we wish we had. And so I frequently, in my work now at the Faculty of Medicine, which is less focused on the environment, although that is part of my portfolio, and so the Global Health Office of the Faculty of Medicine, which has a planetary health component now, does report through to me. But I use this quote largely in my equity, diversity, and inclusion work at the medical school, where I remind folks of this quote from Inez Nin, that says, we don't see the world the way it is, we see it the way we are. There's something about human psychology that has us continue to insist that the world is what we want it to be, even when empirically the evidence suggests that it's not, and that would require us to change. And so I see in the environmental movement that, similar to public health issues, there is this set of blinders that we put on that prevent us from seeing the world the way it actually is. And if we can't see it the way it actually is, then we can't engage with what needs to change, right? And so a lot of my work is exposing to decision makers, to policymakers, to physicians, the world the way it actually is. And often what I find is when they see it the way it actually is, there's this moment of, oh, I wish I hadn't seen that. And then there's this, well, now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it. And that means that I'm compelled to do something about it because I don't like what I see. And so creating that cognitive dissonance in people, particularly with complex issues, I find can be really helpful, because even if they don't quite know what the step is, they are so cognitively dissonant that they feel compelled to do something to try and resolve that. And that can be a helpful place for people to be in from a point of learning. And so I feel like the world is in a bit of cognitive dissonance now around, sort of the existence of the Anthropocene. And so this idea that human populations have now permanently left their mark on this planet in a way that cannot be reversed seems to somehow not be grabbing people in a way that I might expect. And it's not until often, you know, in the rare times that I have given talks on the environment, and I have given a few, including at the Canadian Public Health Association National Conference and other places, I do remind people that this is the era that we are living in. And I see the cognitive dissonance emerging, where folks go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it had gotten to that point. And then I say, you know, it got to that point 60 years ago. Like, we've been living with this for quite some time. And folks have this kind of realization of, oh my gosh, I'm seeing something that I hadn't seen before. And so some of what I'm going to share with you this evening by way of conversation points, I'm not even going to call them suggestions, is ways in which we can continue to sort of do that exposure for folks to things that they may have heard about, seen about, you know, it might be somewhere on the periphery, but to put it right in front of them to say, this is the conversation we need to be having. Just like in my anti-racism work, I'm saying the conversation we need to be having today is about Black Lives Matter. We actually can't escape it, not even in medicine. Similarly, these are the conversations, but you know, about the Anthropocene that we need to be having right now, that I think it's helpful to sort of put directly in front of people and then support them through the cognitive dissonance of the realization that they experience. I think part of the reason that folks go to that place of cognitive dissonance is because the things that we're talking about, you know, in the environment and in public health can rightly, I think, be characterized as wicked problems. And if you haven't seen this paper on wicked problems from 1973, I do encourage you to find it. It's easily searchable on Google. It was written by these two urban planners in the United States, Riddle and Weber, who were looking to explain the challenge, the very real challenge in the 1970s of creating cities that weren't going to hurt people. And what they realized in their search was that, and this is their quote, the search for a scientific base for confronting those problems of social policy is bound to fail just because of the nature of the problems. And so they described the problems as wicked problems. And they went on to say, science has been developed to deal with tame problems. No wonder science is failing us in these social policy questions. I love this quote. Generally, when I give it to physician audiences, they hate it because it really does challenge this notion that science is going to solve everything. But what they talk about here is this idea that science is useful when you have a relatively discrete problem where all of the variables or most of the variables can be identified. You can maybe set up a control against that problem where those same variables don't exist. And then you can do some work to determine how impactful are those variables, and therefore which of the variables do you need to work on. But policy isn't like that. Social policy isn't like that. Social problems are not like that. And so they go on to say they cannot be definitively described. And in a pluralistic society, there's not going to be any undisputable public good. Somebody's always going to dispute what's in the good of the public versus not, right? So there's not ever going to be an objective definition of equity. The policies that respond to social problems are never going to be correct or false, because so much around the policy question is going to be gray. And so it doesn't make sense to talk about optimal solutions, because the qualifications that you would have to put on the solution in order to make it optimal would mean that it would barely scratch the surface of the problem to begin with, right? And so there are no real solutions in the sense of definitive and objective answers. This was their quote in 1973. And so I recently returned to this paper. I was introduced to it probably 10 years ago. And I recently returned to it because I find it is so helpful for describing where we're at now with a number of social problems in the world, including the problems of the environment. And so they went on in the paper to define these 10 characteristics of wicked problems. And this is where, when I speak to physician audiences, they get really sort of antsy. So the first one, I love this one. There's no definitive formulation of a wicked problem, which means that depending on who you ask, the description of the problem may be very different than if you ask it to the next person, right? It's kind of like that image of, you know, all of the people trying to describe the elephant. It really depends on your point of view as to what it is you think the problem is. Wicked problems have no stopping rule, so there's no one single rule that when you meet that checkpoint, the problem will go away. The solutions to wicked problems, as they said in that original quote, are not true or false, but rather good or bad. So you either do something that seems reasonably good, or you do something that's bad, but neither one of them will necessarily make the problem go away. So there's no immediate and no ultimate test of the solution to a wicked problem. Every solution to a wicked problem is a one-shot operation. There's no opportunity to learn by trial and error. And this is because, and they may describe this later on when we get to the other characteristics of this interesting point around wicked problems, which is by application of a solution to the wicked problem, the problem itself changes, morphs into something new. So you literally have one shot with your solution, and then you're going to have to wait and see what happens from that solution, and then apply a second round of solutions in order to keep the problem evolving, but it won't go away. And so characteristic number 6, wicked problems do not have an exhaustively describable set of potential solutions or a well-described set of permissible operations, kind of parameters that you can incorporate into the plan. Every wicked problem is unique, but get this one, number 8. Every wicked problem can also be considered to be a symptom of another problem. So you start to see how tangled these things are, right? Characteristic number 9, the existence of a discrepancy that represents the problem can be explained a number of different ways because of rule number 1, which is there are multiple ways to describe the problem, and none of those ways is necessarily wrong or right. And then rule number 10 is that the planner or the problem solver has no right to be wrong. You just have to keep going. You just have to keep working the problem. And so if you start to think about wicked problems anywhere in your life, you can start to see them anywhere. And certainly they exist in the questions that are facing us around the environment today. And I want to be clear about what that means. So these wicked problems are not just difficult problems. These are the malignant, tenacious problems that require that in order for us to work them, we are going to have to evolve as the problem evolves. This means bobbing and weaving with the problem. And I recently attended a leadership course on complexity, where one of the participants sort of said, it really is about working the problem, learning to love the problem, rather than always searching for the solution. And the risk is that if you jump to the solution too quickly, you will miss all of the ways in which you could have been helping the problem to evolve to something less problematic, and instead impose something that actually may make things worse because you haven't done that work. And so really working the problem is the thing to do. Now think about that from the example, for example, of the healthcare system where we currently are in Nova Scotia, where we have this wicked problem of access to primary healthcare, for example, and the amount of rhetoric that is often put forward around how we might solve, quote unquote, solve that problem. But you won't hear in that dialogue much about how are we actually loving the problem, working the problem so that we fully understand what its components are, what its characteristics are, so that we can make sure that the problems that that the solutions that we apply will do something productive. And how are we looking for all of the things that we know are going to tumble out of it if it's a wicked problem? How are we looking for the unintended consequences of our solution when we do that? How are we looking for the ways in which the problem evolves because of our intervention? That conversation is not spilling out, at least not in the public discourse. And yet, if you're going to engage with wicked problems, you do have to commit to that. You have to commit to being able to course correct as the problem changes and as new information comes available as a point of that. And so I bring that forward because I think in the question of, our current state of the environment, there's no question that that's a wicked problem. And it starts me wondering on this path of what are the skills then that we need in order to do this? And we had said we would talk about this from the point of view of sort of lessons learned from the pandemic. And there are many here. The question of COVID-19 and how we manage that as an international society itself is a wicked problem, and is linked to all kinds of other wicked problems around what is the structure, for example, for public health that supports that type of complex public health problem coming up. What is the intersection of those structures with other governance structures in order to effectively manage those problems? And you start to see that if you're going to engage with that level of complexity, you're going to need some skills. And so I describe the skills kind of this way, as I think about it, I've already said, you're going to have to be fairly comfortable with ambiguity and this notion that the problem is going to change and you won't know what it's changing to, which means that you just need to be ready to do that bobbing and weaving with the problem. And so that is that idea of start somewhere with the problem. Don't abandon the problem. But once you start, just commit to following it wherever it goes. And you won't be able to predict where it goes or what spin-offs come from that when it goes forward. I heard a lot today from your AGM about the patience and time, long time commitments to, the environmental issues that the EAC has engaged with over its existence. And so want to acknowledge that that is a skill, I'm going to say, and not everybody has that skill. So kudos to you for having that and maintaining those skills in place. I also heard in your sort of descriptions tonight, your commitment to that dogged pursuit of the unintended consequences. So looking for those, I think that's important. And all of this to me points to a willingness to see the world the way it actually is and be able to describe it to other people is the point, so that they can see it too, even if it's not how they wish the world to be. I didn't hear a lot today about misinformation, but I know that that exists in the environmental movement, everything from, the ridiculousness of the flat earthers to, all kinds of other ways in which folks try and deny climate change. And so, would point to the need for any of us who are engaging with wicked problems to become competent with the skills that will allow us to keep up with the increasing sophistication of those misinformation efforts. And so inoculation strategies is one that we use in medicine, largely around the anti-vax movement, but I think it has utility for some of those climate change denial and other arguments that get put forward, where the idea behind inoculation is that you simply expose people to the idea that, hey, there are these ideas out there that are not evidence-based. Here's the ways in which they're not evidence-based. Let me debunk all of that for you. Now you know, so when you run into it, you are inoculated against picking it up as your own point of view, because I've already given you the information that would debunk that. So that's the term inoculation strategies. And I think that's a helpful strategy for the environmental movement. And I know that some of that inoculation work is regularly in play already. And again, this skill around perseverance, because once you engage with a wicked problem, you realize the problem will likely outlive you. There's no off-ramp for these problems. They just keep evolving. They don't go away. And so how do you maintain the presence in the problem through perseverance is a big part of the skill set that's needed. And, certainly as I look at the complexity of these questions, I'm reminded that not everybody loves complexity. Our decision makers often don't like complexity. In fact, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I got a sense of this quite often, where public health would have answers that were, well, it's complex. And yes, we're looking at disease transmission, but here are all the other outcomes that we're also worried about. And here are all the other considerations we might put into play before X, Y, and Z gets decided, and literally being told that's too complex, give me the simple version. And the problem is, with some things, there is no simple version, right? You can sometimes simplify complexity for the purposes of finding a starting point, but the complexity of the thing doesn't go away because you've done that. And so being aware that not everybody loves complexity is really helpful then, as we think about what do we do then when we engage with wicked problems that allows us to keep going and not get sidelined, for example, by the folks who can't handle the complexity of the thing. And so I'm going to end by offering you a few suggestions around that, and then would love to hear your questions. One is, I think there's something to be said for taking that simple entry into wicked problems, as long as you're prepared to stay with the problem after that, wherever it takes you. And so in public health, we use a 5 whys exercise. Some of you will have heard this in health promotion circles. We call it Jason's broken leg or Jason's injured leg, which is an evidence generating exercise that actually works to help us uncover the root causes of a thing. The thing can be a social problem. It could be an environmental problem. It could be a policy problem. It could be a point of view. And so that 5 whys exercise, serially asking the question why, is how we get at that so that we can find out where it is that we might be able to intervene. And so I won't go through the exercise, but it's available on the Government of Canada website. And although it looks just like an interesting thought exercise, if you put it into practice, what we find in public health is that you can actually generate real-time policy decisions. The example that I have on this page at the top right is from Kansas City, Missouri, where by applying basically a 5 whys exercise, they reduced a gap in life expectancy between white and Black residents of Kansas City that was 6 years apart. So Black residents were dying 6 years earlier than their white neighbors. And by applying a 5 whys exercise, they actually reduced that gap to 4 years in a 5-year period, so in real time. And the work continues. So it looks like a simple kind of thought exercise, but actually can be real-time evidence generating. And so would offer that to you. I've talked about the folks who can't engage with complexity, but we know that the complexity is there. And so I would offer that it will be really important going forward to find the people who can engage with complexity, with the ambiguity of the thing, with the need for that perseverance. And so if you can find those folks and make them your people, and I heard lots of examples tonight that you may already be doing that, I think that's a really wise strategy, and congratulations to for the extent that you've done that already. This is, I don't think we have enough of this in decision makers in particular. And so where we can support these folks to become the change makers and decision makers, I think that's really key. Again, leadership isn't only about having the brightest ideas. We're actually going to need the folks who can hold complex space when no one else is willing. And so with that in mind, I would also say that some of what is required from a leadership perspective is this idea around acknowledging and exposing some of the ugly truths. And I heard you talk tonight about the need to do that with compassion, and I would 100% agree that that is the thing to do. And so recognizing that it is human nature that has gotten us here, and that there will be some cognitive dissonance for populations as they truly engage with what that means, I think is really important to hold that with compassion, but also not shy away from exposing it. And in particular, another sort of point that I like to bring to the attention of the audiences I'm with, who, you know, for all of their skills and technical prowess and degrees, for example, in medicine, are really blind to the ideas around human exceptionalism as one of the antecedent causes of the Anthropocene. You know, this idea that humans somehow don't have to play by the same rules of the environment that other animal populations do. When I expose that to those audiences, they're genuinely shocked. And then it takes them a while before they go, gosh, I recognize that. I recognize that human exceptionalism, that idea that I can exist here and my impact on the environment doesn't matter, because the impact on the environment to me should be what is the primary concern. That idea for exceptionalism is something that I think needs to be held with compassion, but still fiercely. And so if you can expose those kinds of ugly truths to folks, then I think it helps everybody focus. And especially if we can expose those to our leaders and our world leaders, I would say that's going to be a primary concern. I increasingly worry that our world leaders are in fact distracted. And while they are distracted, in the absence of their coherent voice on these matters, individuals are starting to find their own way through their concerns about the environment. But here's where I worry about that. This article on the left-hand page is from today's Guardian. And over the past few weeks, they have published a few articles pointing to the ways in which individuals are now trying to find ways to either buy their way out of an impending climate crisis in their region, or find survival skills that they believe will help them survive the climate crisis. And what's ridiculous about that is that this idea that we are individually going to solve or survive this, I think, is a mistake. And so the commentary in the article is reflected on the right-hand side of the page. And one of the quotes is that, you know, in the United States, for example, disaster preparedness is framed around the ideas of, you know, having a go bag, 72 hours of preparedness, you know, poured food and water to get you through that type of thing. But this speaker was pointing to the idea that climate breakdown is a test of the systems that are in place, whole systems. it's not going to be a test of the individual's ability to defy the worst. And so the problem isn't solvable at an individual level. The problem is actually rooted in poor policy decisions over decades. And of course, the solution has to come from there. And so if the world's leaders are distracted, I'm worried that increasingly this is where individuals are going to go, is to this place of individualism. And I think, you know, as we are having the calls about sort of those direct impacts on the environment and the things that we need to pay attention to, I think we also have to start having the calls, and I'm not a sociologist, but as I look at this happened in the COVID-19 pandemic too, where this rise of individualism came up several times, and in some instances trumped collectivism. I think we have to make some decisions about that and at least provoke some conversations about that as we are having some conversations about the crisis itself. And so I would just point to that because I think if we don't come onto some collective page, the individual efforts will continue, and I think we'll all fail as a result of that. So when you, Ecology Action Center, get the attention of those world leaders, and I know that you are capable of doing that, your capacity, I think, to hold them in a place of understanding the dangers of individualism will be key. And so I'm going to end just by inviting you, I think, to please keep doing the work that you're doing, because we need you. And we need your capacity to see the world and explain it to the rest of us for the way that it actually is, even when that's ugly and unflattering. And so thank you for that. Thank you for the inspiration that you continue to provide to Nova Scotia communities and beyond. And I think that's it. So Maggie, I have no idea if that's what you thought I was going to say when you assigned that title, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, and I think it's over to David to thank you for your intriguing and inspiring talk, and also one that, you know, really saw the EAC in our work. So thanks for seeing us, and thanks for being in it with us. And I'll turn it over to David to field the questions in collaboration with the online folks.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Gaynor. That was a really, really thought-provoking speech, and I know that there's going to be lots of ideas whirring in our heads long after this evening, but it'd be good to start, see if anyone has any comments or questions that you'd like to ask of Gaynor, and if there's anyone in the room has got any things you'd like to sort of pick up on or ask. Right.
What do I do? Should I just stand up?
You stand up, and I shall repeat it so that those online can hear.
Sure. Thank you very much. That was spectacular. I love that. One of the things that stuck with me, you mentioned the concept of this no off ramp, which I think is very sobering and very true. But I find in situations like that, at least personally, that motivation can be a challenge when you don't see the end goal, or maybe there is no clear end goal that you can define. So how do you stay motivated when your work is so long-term and you may not live to see the end goal?
Gaynor, I'm not sure if you heard that question. Would you like me to?
I did. I did hear it. So yeah. So, and I can repeat it a little bit, David, for the folks in the room. This idea of when there is no off ramp and it's hard to see the end goal, how do you stay motivated? Gosh, it's a good question. I think a couple of things. I think I thrive now in work where I stop worrying about the end goal, and I just focus on the next thing. So if you are comfortable in emergence, then you recognize that, okay, we see something in front of us right now. We can't understand it completely. We know it can't stay the way it is. So let's just try something and see what that does. That's often a short enough sort of process that you will see something at the end of it. And then what you learn from that becomes the fuel for the next thing that you do. And that's the whole sort of mechanism of engaging with complexity. And I find it's probably maybe that's how I stay motivated, is because I'm not looking for the end goal. I'm just focused on the thing that I've just done and what did that create, and then where do I follow from there. It keeps me enough in the moment that I'm not sort of disillusioned by the idea that I haven't made the problem go away yet, right? And so some of it is maybe an orientation thing. I no longer look or have an expectation that I'm going to make the problem go away when I'm dealing with wicked problems. And so that allows me to sort of stay in that place of, okay, so we're just engaging with the thing that's in front of us right now. So as an example, the anti-racism work I do at the medical school right now, holy cow, complexity upon complexity upon complexity. And, last year we changed our admissions pathway without really knowing what the outcome was going to be. And we got some really great outcomes, and we got some unintended outcomes that we weren't anticipating. And so this year's work is dealing with the unintended outcomes, and that's okay. And we don't have an end goal in mind for that work. We're just going to keep learning and growing as we go. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. One more in the room, and then I'll see if there's any questions coming up into chat. They're not at the moment. If you're online, you may think of some questions that you want to ask and pop them in the chat, and Rowan will put some of those forward to us. Is it someone else had their hands up earlier? Michael, what's your question?
It's sort of similar to the last question, where you were asked, how do you stay motivated? But how about when we tell and we put across very well some of these ugly truths to our leaders? How do we keep them motivated, or to other people that we're talking to motivated? Because it's getting kind of it was getting kind of dismal there for a while during your lecture. You feel like, oh my God, I can't do anything. But how would you deal with trying to keep the people motivated once they've been told the ugly truth?
I was going to ask you guys that question, but I have some ideas around it. I think there's a couple of things. The EAC has done a tremendous job at keeping these issues in the public eye, and I think that's really important. And with the public comes the media, and I think that's a critical audience. And I heard you sort of speaking about that today, and sort of giving kudos to colleagues who have done that media work in particular. I think that's really important. I also think, my own experience in public health has been that when I have felt like the formal leaders of public health were not listening, I took the work elsewhere. And that requires a couple of things. One is, and I think this is probably a really germane conversation, I'm currently involved in some work still with Engage Nova Scotia around well-being and well-being economies in Nova Scotia and in Canada. And what I love about that work is that it is all about wicked problems of who gets left behind when our social policies fail, including our environmental policy. But we're framing it as an economic conversation. Not subversively, but because it genuinely is an economic conversation, and we hadn't taken that angle before. And so it's changed the audiences for that work. We are now as much, interested in a conversation around economics as we are in a conversation about equity. And because we have had to do the work of learning how to speak economics along that, this was true in my public health life too. We're recognizing more and more the value of actually going in the economic door as opposed to going straight through the social policy door, which is where we might have gone before. And what we're offering deliberately and without sort of pretense is to support the economic conversation as long as we think it meets the equity goals. And even in my public health work with urban planners, for example, that was always my approach, which was rather than come at them with health goals that must be incorporated, I would ask them, well, what are you worried about? And they would say, well, we're worried about the safety of our streets. And I would say, yeah, me too. So what can we do together about that? And so there was something about maybe learning the language that keeps you at the policy table and going at the policy table with that approach. That might be one way to stay on the radar of those decision makers, if that makes sense. I think the other thing is to find the decision makers who are already there. as I said, and in particular, who can handle this complexity. There aren't many, but there are a few. I think where they exist in government, for example, they don't exist at the elected officials level necessarily, but they do exist at the senior officials level, the deputy ministers, the ADMs, that type of thing. They may not be, for example, in Department of Environment, but they might be in a different department, like CCH, for example, Communities, Culture and Heritage, and I think they have another, tourism maybe is now there. You know, so you may look for those champions actually in different places than you might normally look, would be my other suggestion.
Thank you, Gaynor. One question, Rowan, we got a question from online?
We do. I would like to know what exercises you suggest for increasing one's appreciation of prospects.
Okay, that may not have carried across the room. So Helga's question was about what exercises can we do for appreciating one's understanding of complexity?
Increasing
Our appreciation about complexity. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a more difficult one. I can point to a few resources, and I by no means have it cracked, but then I suppose if I did have it cracked, it wouldn't be complexity with it. So there's that. So a couple of things. I mentioned the Presencing Institute at Harvard and MIT. They have a number of resources on complexity online. And Dr. Thomas Homer Dixon, if you're not familiar with his work, I suspect many of you will be. He is a complexity scientist whose area of expertise is the environment. He was at University of Waterloo, where he ran a complexity institute. I think he has moved that work to Simon Fraser University. And he's written several books that he doesn't call books on complexity, but they are 100% books on complexity. One of them I referenced in the talk, or at least had a picture of, called The Ingenuity Gap, which is one of my favorite books. He's recently written a new one called Commanding Hope, where what he describes is not commanding as a verb, but commanding as an adjective, the type of hope that we need to have in order to stay in the environmental movement. I am a huge fan of Dr. Homer Dixon's work, and so I would encourage anybody who is interested in sort of the environmental movement and the complexity of that movement to engage with his writing for sure. He is also a close collaborator of Dr. Trevor Hancock, who's probably not much of a stranger to many of you in the room, who is another environmental activist and public health physician from BC, and is currently working on a number of issues related to ecological determinants of health. And so Trevor's work would be something else that I would engage with. But Thomas Homer Dixon in particular, as a Canadian scholar and expert on complexity and the environment, I think is a really interesting kind of go-to resource.
Okay, thank you, Gaynor. It's 8:25 now. So we're going to need to move on to 5 minutes of members forum. If you're still bursting to get a question to Gaynor, you can sneak that in the next 5 minutes. But I just want to say thank you again to Gaynor for a really wonderful talk today. Okay, so we have just a few minutes before the teas and coffees are served and some nibbles at the back. So I just have a couple of quick messages before we move on to some further questions. I earlier didn't mention to you, if any of you are uncomfortable with your face or your head or whatever appearing in any photographic material that we use, we have been filming tonight. If that's a concern for you, come and speak to me or to Joe at the end of the evening, and we'll make sure that your visage is not going to be appearing in any of our documents. So just catch us at the end of the evening if that's the case. Another thing I would point out is we have in the room, I'm afraid if you're online, you just have to try and get hold of an electronic copy or come into the office sometime. We're handing out these, the new vision, mission, values. This represents some of the great work that Maggie's been leading us all through as we establish a new strategy for the Ecology Action Centre. And this really captures our vision, mission and values really beautifully. And it'd be nice to sort of take that away, because that's a good card to sort of help provide us some sort of focus as we move forward. So really nice piece there. There's a pile of those to pick up on the way out if you've not already picked one up. So And does anyone else have any other questions that you'd like to sort of bring to other members? Or anything you'd like to share with us? If you'd like to, so put your hand up. Michael.
It's Mikey again. When does the EAC foresee having the staff basically congregating back again in the building on Fern Lane?
That's a great question, Mike, and a really fair question from someone who's given us such great work these last year or many years before I've been around on the front desk. We're moving into a world where we can actually start to sort of see a more steady practice in how we operate from where the pandemic has put us till now. What that looks like is staff having 1 or 2 days a week as part of their routine in the office. That's flexible. One of the things that the organisation has always had as its strength is being very flexible in how staff work. And that flexibility will remain. So I think we're already seeing staff back in the office more regularly than we have been. And I would encourage staff to come back, but also I'd encourage people, if it's actually a really good fit with the work that you need to be doing, then working at home is fine as well. So that leads us to some further questions down the line of how much office space do we need to use? Can we use that space differently? We're not even beginning to answer those questions yet, but that obviously is posed by that if we have desks that aren't being used every day. But that's how I understand that we'll be moving into this, settling into this hybrid space. And then once that feels a bit steadier, we can sort of explore what that might look like for making better use of Fern Lane if there is the capacity to do so. And I really value the front desk continuing to be a part of that regular use of the building. Shannon.
Just note that Wednesday is a great day to come into the office because Michael brings steak.
Yes.
Thursday.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right, Shannon. Thursdays is a really great day for coming in the office because Michael brings us in lovely treats, which are really appreciated. And if anybody wants to come in on a different day with their own treats, also welcome to do that.
There's just a note to add from Maggie in the chat here. She wants to add that we're considering having some open hours for half days, 4 days a week. So we're sort of moving toward something like that in terms of when we're open to the public.
Yeah.
But still in discussion.
Yeah. Any other questions or observations people want to make? Oh, that's someone scratching their hair up back. Yes. Rowan, is there anything else online that needs picking up?
There is a comment from Linda. She said, good meeting with appreciable comments about existing and starting people. Enjoyed the award presentation. Happy to be in.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I'm glad it was appreciable. It certainly feels to me that it's been a great evening of celebration and challenge as well for us as well. It's 8:29. If there are any other questions, last chance. Well, it's never your last chance to speak in EAC. There's always more opportunities. What I'm going to suggest is we're going to sort of break for teas and coffees. If anyone feels uncomfortable, we're all sort of individually exploring our world back into COVID. You may not feel comfortable being in the same space as people because obviously we can't keep our masks on whilst we are eating food. Then don't feel you have to sort of mingle with whoever, but you can sort of stay away. But teas and coffees are going to be served at the far end. And cake. Most important is celebratory cake. 40 years worth of cake we have to get through.
And gluten-free cake.
Oh, we have a motion to do, don't we?
Yes, but before I wanted to make that motion, I wanted to thank you all for joining. Oh, is this mic on? Before the motion to adjourn, I wanted to thank you all for joining in person and virtually. You could really feel the love tonight. And this kind of event, especially a hybrid event, doesn't take place without an enormous amount of work. So I wanted to thank the team of folks who helped organize this. Lisa Lee, Tim, Joanna, Rowan, Julia, Maggie, Marla, David, and any others. It's a lot of work and you did a wonderful job. So thank you all. And I now motion to adjourn the meeting and. Oh, yes, I'm not even sure. I don't even think we have to vote on it. I think I just say it's. No, we don't for this one. I made a note here. I just get to motion, it's over. And Kate.